Tennis star Naomi Osaka, who is ranked number 2 in the world, dropped out of the French Open because she does not want to interact with the media. Now, you may be wondering, why am I covering this story, as I don't usually cover sports, but this is an issue of mental health, as the reason she dropped out is because of her depression and social anxiety, which is something that I have a lot of experience with, and I want to talk about my experience with that as well. First here, so she initially was going to still stay in the tournament, but then not interact with the press. But then the French Tennis Federation took it a little further. So some comments from them here. They said in response, "It's a deep regret for you journalists, for her, Osaka, personally, and for tennis in general. I think this is a phenomenal mistake. It shows to what extent today there is strong governance in tennis. What is happening there is, in my opinion, not acceptable. There are rules, laws. We will stick to the laws and rules for penalties and fines. It is very detrimental to sport, to tennis, to her probably. She hits the game. She hurts tennis. This is a real problem." This is just a horrible statement from the French Tennis Federation. But if it was just the fines that she said she would accept and pay, then that's one thing. But it's another thing when they would impact her entire career. So more here from The Guardian. With their heavy-handed statement, the Grand Slam tournaments have much for which to answer. They responded to Osaka as if she was a threat, an all too familiar sensation for black athletes who step outside of the box. Osaka said she expected to receive fines, as other players have received for skipping press in the past, and she was prepared to pay them and then discuss further solutions after the event. That should have been enough for the time being. But by repeatedly skipping press conferences, she could be defaulted or even risk suspension from future Grand Slam tournaments. So it wasn't enough for them to fine her. They had to also potentially impact her entire career. Now, yes, on one hand, as I've already seen, people say, oh, she makes, millions. She's very rich. She should just get over it and just talk to the press. Try telling somebody who is afraid of flying to just get over it and take a flight. Doesn't work like that. So before I get to my, experience with this, it's of my opinion that it's completely ridiculous that somebody whose job is to not speak to the press. I mean, her job is to be good at tennis. That's her job. All the media stuff is added on top once they become big stars and really good at what they do. So it makes absolutely no sense to me to force media on individuals when that is not what they have trained for. And yes, I know they go through media training, but when you suffer from social anxiety, it's a whole other thing. It's one thing if, she said, I don't want to talk to the press because I'm lazy, I don't feel like it, screw the press, whatever. That's one thing. It's another thing when she has an actual mental disorder. So this is something that I've struggled with. I was diagnosed with social anxiety disorder when I was 17. And I've had to work through it for almost 2 decades now. It's not something you get over. So I took therapy. I have, put myself in situations that make me feel uncomfortable. But still to this day, there are moments where I just can't. I just can't interact. And I have to avoid the situation. Have to, whether it's turning down opportunities, whether it's simply avoiding, interacting with new people. It's a constant battle. That's what mental health is. I mean, it's not something that you just solve with a pill or with, a couple weeks of therapy. It's an ongoing process. So Naomi Osaka put out a statement after this came out from the French Tennis Federation, saying in part here that the truth is that I have suffered long bouts of depression since the US Open in 2018, and I have had a really hard time coping with that. Anyone that knows me knows I'm introverted, and anyone that has seen me at the tournaments will notice that I'm often wearing headphones, as that helps dull my social anxiety. So this is something she has dealt with clearly her entire life, still deals with it today. And I put out the statement online on Twitter saying, as someone who was diagnosed with social anxiety disorder in my teens, the pressure we put on everyone to be social in jobs that don't at all require it is crazy. Her job is to be good at tennis, not good at talking to the media. Now, some of the replies here, are fantastic, supportive, they understand. Others, honestly, were ignorant. saying that she was entitled, telling her to get over it. Uh, the idea of telling somebody with with social anxiety disorder or any fear to simply get over it and then that's going to work. Look, if you've never dealt with any mental health problems, great. You're in a great position, but you also have really no idea what it's like. So it doesn't matter how much money you have, it doesn't matter how famous you are. If you have a issue like social anxiety disorder, you don't just get over it. It takes time. It takes therapy. It takes years to work through that. And also, as Director X here pointed out in a reply, saying if she did the interviews but wasn't performing to their liking, it would definitely be a problem. Exactly. Even if she agreed to do them, but she wasn't performing well, the media would tear her apart for not answering the questions well. So it's this added pressure in a job that shouldn't require you to be a social butterfly. But just to get a little more into, my experience, to understand how bad social anxiety can be, when I was diagnosed in my teens, I was too nervous, too afraid to go and rent a video game back when back when Blockbuster existed. I was too afraid to rent a game because of the social interaction at the counter. That's how bad it was. So it interferes with things that you want to do. And funny enough, I'm in this, this is like the opposite of what I thought I would ever do. But unfortunately, or fortunately, my desire to discuss politics and educate people online interacted or interfered with my disorder. But I've worked through it. It's gotten better, obviously, but still to this day, if somebody asked me to come on their show, like to give you an example, I was on the Young Turks for the first time, or on their main show for the first time. I'd been on before, but on their main show for the first time at the beginning of the year. When I got that email with the invite, most people that do this would be happy. Like, oh, great, it's a big audience. I get to discuss, my thoughts on these issues. For me, it was immediate dread. Like I almost turned it down because of the kind of impact it has on me beforehand. Now, you may watch the clips when I was on, I seem fine, but a lot of the issue for me, at least now, is beforehand, is the thinking about it. Like, oh, am I going to say something dumb? Am I going to, look stupid? It's these ongoing running thoughts in your head that honestly take up your entire day or week. I mean, that interview or that invite came like 2 weeks before I was on. And for the 2 weeks before, every day it was in my head, like, oh, I'm closer and closer to being on the show. And to be honest, like, it's not a huge deal. Like, yes, the Young Turks have a big audience, but it's not much different from what I do. But still, it's because I didn't have control over the format, didn't know who I was going to be on with, didn't know the stories I was going to cover, and didn't just a lot of these unknowns. And that's when you have an anxiety disorder like that, it's a lot of the unknowns that really impact you. So, it's an ongoing thing. And even to this day, another example, if I meet somebody for the first time, the person I'm meeting probably thinks I hate them because I'm not good at first impressions. For me to be myself with you, it takes time. I have to get comfortable with you. I have to get to know you. But the first time I meet you, I'm likely going to forget what your name is because I'm too distracted by what I'm doing to pay attention to what you're saying. So so I come off looking horribly. And again, it's been almost 20 years since I was diagnosed, and I still deal with this. People need to understand, for anyone to dismiss somebody over, an issue like this and not understand the full impact of it, it really doesn't help. It only makes it worse. You have to give people the time and space for them to be able to battle these disorders, to get the help that they need. I don't care how famous you are, how wealthy you are. It doesn't make sense to force anybody into a position that makes them feel uncomfortable, especially when that is not their job.